After an extraordinary televised meeting of his Security Council, President Vladimir Putin said he will make a decision today whether to recognize as independent the two Russian-controlled separatist regions in the eastern Ukraine, which could open the path to annexing those areas and a serious escalation to this crisis. Meanwhile, President Biden met behind closed doors with his security team. He's agreed to a potential summit with Vladimir Putin in the hopes of finding a diplomatic resolution. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky joins me now from Ukraine. Aaron, what happens if Putin does go ahead and recognize these Russian-controlled separatist regions as independent?
It would almost certainly touch off sanctions by the United States and its allies. It's not clear it would be the full package that leaders have been talking about over the last few days in response to a Russian invasion, but it would draw a response because it could signal the end of diplomacy. The prospect of Putin's decision has also touched off a flurry of phone calls in just the last few minutes. We understand that Putin himself has been on the phone with the German Chancellor. The President of Ukraine, Zelensky, has been on the phone with Chancellor Scholz and the President of France, all trying to figure out what the next move might be. Because if Putin does recognize the two breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine as independent, he could then invade under the guise of protecting the 800,000 Russian speakers in those regions. It would also touch off a question, Diane, about what happens next. Putin effectively controls the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and has for the last 8 years or so at least. And so some U.S. officials doubt that he would stop there, and that's why the U.S. is saying that the prospect of a diplomatic resolution to this diminishes hour by hour.
And what do you think, what did we learn from that televised meeting when it comes to the possibility of Putin negotiating with the U.S. or any other NATO allies?
Well, it was really an extraordinary bit of theater, wasn't it? There was Vladimir Putin seated at his big white table, arrayed before him members of top security staff, and they each, one by one, were called up to the microphone to offer their opinion of whether Putin should formally recognize these two breakaway regions as independent, and there was no dissenting voice in the room. Putin says that he is going to make his decision soon. We expect to see him on Russian television at any moment now. But it was also expressed that there was really no reason to be negotiating with the United States. We heard from some top Russian officials that said the U.S. was not going to move, was not going to change its view about what Russia should do. So there was really no point in this summit between the presidents Biden and Putin as had been proposed.
Now, the Kremlin said today that Russian forces destroyed 2 Ukrainian armored vehicles and killed 5 Ukrainians who were caught entering Russia. The Ukraine officials are denying that, and this all comes amid fears that Russia's manufacturing a pretext to go ahead and attack and invade Ukraine. So what can you tell us is actually going on with the latest on that? How is misinformation being used?
Well, it's part of the game, and the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, went to the United Nations Security Council last week to warn that we'd see some of this. And in recent days, we've seen these kinds of reports of shelling, or there was one that a Ukrainian shell had supposedly hit a border post in Russia. The Ukrainians have denied it, and the U.S. believes it's just the Russians fabricating an excuse to go ahead and move forward with an attack. And in just the last few minutes, we've seen more of these kinds of provocations with the Russia-backed separatists in the region in eastern Ukraine saying that there'd been some additional shelling or a car bomb. We've not been able to verify any of these videos, and the Ukrainians believe they're fake.
Now, we've been looking at these images of 150,000 Russian troops and tanks positioned at the border. U.S. officials have warned of an all-out assault on Ukraine coming in just the next few days. So how urgent is the feeling there on the ground?
It's really quite a menacing force that's massed on Ukraine's borders. But I have to tell you, we were out in the main square here in Lviv in western Ukraine on Sunday, and it felt quite normal. People were out in church. The churches were full. The cafes were full. People were out having brunch and strolling with their families. We keep hearing that the Ukrainians have a tough constitution. They've been at this with Russia now for the better part of 8 years. And the expectation is that if Russia does move forward as expected, the Ukrainians are going to fight. And it's going to be quite bloody. And the U.S. believes that the intention here is to cause some rather significant humanitarian suffering.
Yeah, that's what everyone's trying to avoid here. Aaron Katersky, we appreciate it. As always, Aaron, thank you. And for more on this, I want to bring in ABC News White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks. Mary Alice, President Biden also met with his own national security team this morning. So what do we know about what happened in that meeting?
Yeah, Diane, the president hasn't had public events today. Instead, he's been mostly huddled with senior members of his national security team. Our cameras caught the vice president going into the White House today alongside the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, the CIA director, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This, of course, comes after President Biden was huddled with his National Security Council for over 2 hours yesterday as well, and making calls yesterday to foreign leaders, to French President Macron. Clearly, the president is trying to follow this sort of moment by moment, hour by hour, as things escalate.
So how likely is a Biden-Putin meeting at this point, given all that's happened today?
Yeah, the White House is pretty skeptical that any meeting will actually take place. They continue to tell us that the overwhelming evidence that they are seeing is that Putin plans to invade. And so any meeting that they might agree to, in principle, would be preconditioned on the idea of there not being an invasion, of there not being any increased violence. And so right now, the White House is telling us they're not making concrete plans for a summit, but they do want to send the message to Putin and the world that all diplomatic doors are open if Putin is willing to walk through them and continue the path of diplomacy instead.
And Mary Alice, I know you also had a chance to speak with several Ukrainian Americans who held an event in front of the Lincoln Memorial yesterday. Some of them have family back in the Ukraine. What did they tell you?
Yeah, Diane, a lot of them had family back in Ukraine. You can imagine just unbelievable shock and disbelief. One gentleman saying he just can't believe that in 2022 we'd be talking about the threat of a land war in Europe, that a major European capital could be facing this kind of threat. And there was, of course, practical concerns, too. Like I said, so many of them have loved ones and families in Ukraine. They've been trying to talk to them about whether they should evacuate, what they should do. Take a listen to one conversation I had with a gal named Natalia.
It's so personal for us, and it's just, you know, I've slowly convinced my relatives that real danger is coming. They see it now, so we're just asking them to stock up on food, stock up on water, get diapers. You know.
Now, she told me about her elderly aunt as well, who's 80, she said just can't physically leave the capital city there. They're trying to figure out what they should do. And I was surprised at how many told me that their family planned to stay, wanted to stay, because they intended to fight. Diane?
All right, Mary Alice Parks, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.